that I learned, and then I'll encourage you with one final word. First of all, I learned that the government, when I was poor, could be a safety net but never a trampoline. Right? Any upward mobility was going to require the individual to create it, to develop it. See, I understand, and I don't even mean this in a partisan way, but the same people that were poor when Barack Obama took office, still are. They're going to be poor when he leaves office. Because I was poor, and presidents came and went, and governors came and went, and elected officials came and went, and they never put a car in my garage, and they never certainly put a roof over my head. See, I understand that the government will never spin you into the middle class. Right? The government will never spin you into being responsible. You know, not going to spin me into making straight A's when I'm in high school so I can get to Stanford University. Not going to spin me into cultivating my talents as a football player. At some point, the individual has to understand that achievement comes down to the individual. Imagine that. Take responsibility for your own success. So I find myself in this state, in this country, at this hour, with the complexity of problems that we are facing, running for Secretary of State here in California. And let me share this with you. I've sat down and I've met with all the candidates. I've heard Meg, I've heard Steve. I've sat down with all the U.S. Senate candidates, and I can tell you one thing right now. None of the presidential candidates and none of the gubernatorial candidates and none of the U.S. Senate candidates are going to come up with some new creative, some new innovative idea or plan or way to fix our state. It's not going to happen. We do not have a deficit of ideas. There are websites that are dedicated to telling us exactly what our problems are and exactly what the solutions are. But the gap between dysfunctional government and functional government, between balanced budgets and budget deficits, is leadership. We need leadership. Let me give you one great example of leadership that I'm talking about. We need principled leadership. Back in 1854, our country faced gridlock, much worse than the gridlock that we face right now in our Congress and in our state legislature. Because that gridlock was a Congress that was divided with half free states and half slave states. And civil war loomed in the background at all times. And they were jockeying for power and to divide up resources. And so a guy by the name of Stephen Douglas comes along with the Kansas-Nebraska Act, and he says, I have a common ground solution. It is not necessary to go to war. Why don't we say that for every new state that comes into the Union, we will simply decide by popular sovereignty whether we will have slavery or not. We'll just leave it up to a vote. Never mind that James Madison in the Federalist Papers warned us against the tyranny of the majority, that sometimes the majority may want something that's not good for the majority. That we have certain principles, i.e. that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, the rights of life, liberty, and the liberty in the pursuit of happiness. So Abraham Lincoln comes along as a principal leader, and this is what he tells Stephen Douglas. He says, I reject your common ground solution, and I demand higher ground, because we cannot live half slave and half free, because a house divided against itself cannot stand. See, principled leaders understand the difference between higher ground and common ground. Some things are worth fighting for. Common ground is rooted. Common ground is rooted in appeasement. It's rooted in concessions. And far too often our current president pontificates on common ground. See, common ground is when he says, can we move from partisanship to bipartisanship? That's not rooted in principle. What does that mean? That's saying, can't we all just get along? Can't we stop being mean-spirited to each other and having strong disagreements? And what we say to him is that, no, we cannot all just get along. As long as you're strong-arming a partisan health care plan on us that's requiring every American to buy something that we may or may not want, we cannot all just get along. And as long as you are putting us an additional $1 trillion into deficit without reducing the cost of health care, we can't get along. And that is exactly what Abraham Lincoln told his contemporaries, that as long as you want to advance slavery into new territories, we can't get along. And coincidentally, that is what George Washington and a group of rebels told the British, that as long as you want taxation without representation, we cannot all just get along. Some things are worth fighting for. That's principled leadership. We must demand leaders whose spine that we can see from the front. That's principled leadership. Principled leadership says that there are some things that are always right and some things that are always wrong. Budget, or rather deficit spending, is always wrong. Paying a woman less salary for the same work that a man does, that's always wrong. Civil rights violations, those things are always wrong. But balanced budgets, that's always right. Capitalism, free markets, less taxes, less regulation, less government, those things are always right. But then secondly, not only must we demand our leaders be principled, we must demand that our leaders can lead 360 degrees. See, anyone can lead down. I own a company, I tell people what to do, they do it. But see, leading laterally, that takes skill. Because that's amongst your peers. You must build consensus, you must build coalitions. And then leading up, that's the most difficult. Because leading up requires you to work with people who don't need you. People who are more powerful than you. People who are more wealthy than you. People who have more connections than you. People who will be there long after you're gone, but they want you on the team because you see further ahead, you see clearer, and you see before others. They want you on the team because you're a maven, you're a salesman, you're a connector, that somehow you can get in a room full of people who have different egos and different agendas, and you can galvanize people and start working towards solutions and moving the ball up the field. We need leaders that can lead 360 degrees. And when we have those leaders that can lead 360 degrees, leaders that are truly principled, then we can start moving out of the dysfunction that we have in our California state government and also in our federal government. But understand this, we did not get into this mess overnight, and nor will we get out of it overnight. Right. But also understand that these are not self-correcting type of problems. We're not going to wake up and drift into balanced budgets. I guess we just accidentally balanced the budget in California. It's not going to happen. It is by the intentional efforts of those of us who are willing to work hard. And listen, I've heard what the skeptics have said. I've heard what the cynics have said, that our government is not governable, that our problems are not manageable. Well, understand this, California is not going anywhere. The United States of America is not going anywhere. We're not going to wake up 10 years from now and realize that California is gone. So all of you cynics and all of you skeptics, please get out of the way of those of us who want to put our hands to the plow and begin the long, hard process of turning our state and our country around. Because I understand this, that if we're willing to work hard enough, that it can be morning in America again. That if we're willing to put our hands to the plow, that it can be morning in America again. That if we can't run out of our problems, we'll jog out. That if we can't jog, we'll crawl. If we can't crawl, guess what? We'll come out with a shovel. If we don't have a shovel, we will dig ourselves out with a spoon. And if we don't have a spoon, we will be committed to digging ourselves out with our hands. But if we get the right leaders in office, and I hope that I'm one of those leaders, we will, under all circumstances, come out of this mess. Thank you guys for having me. God bless you.